The Cleveland Browns just did something nobody expected, and it might change everything. Just a few months ago, this was a team people laughed at. Broken offense. No protection, constant pressure. It didn't matter who was under center, the result was always the same. Chaos, mistakes, lost games. Now suddenly, that same team is being talked about very differently. Because overnight, the Browns didn't just improve their offense, they rebuilt the entire foundation of it. And the craziest part? It looks like every single move was made with one goal in mind, setting up ShedeurSanders to take over. Think about that for a second. This is a quarterback who spent so much time under pressure, running for his life, trying to make something out of nothing, that most people never even got to see what he could really do. The flashes were there. The talent was obvious, but the situation, it was holding everything back. And now, that situation might be gone. Because what the Browns just built in front of him isn't normal. We're talking about a completely reshaped offensive line. New pieces, real investment, real protection. The kind of protection that changes how a quarterback plays, how he thinks, how he sees the field. The kind that turns hesitation into confidence and confidence into dominance. And here, where it gets even more interesting. There's been a lot of buzz online, fans, analysts, even insiders, all starting to say the same thing, that this doesn't feel like a random rebuild anymore. It feels intentional, like the Browns are quietly putting together a system designed specifically for Shedeur to succeed. Not just survive, succeed. And when that kind of narrative starts building, it spreads fast. Because people are starting to realize something most didn't expect. If this setup actually works the way it's supposed to, then the version of ShedeurSanders we're about to see might be completely different from anything we've seen before. More time, more control, more freedom to read defenses and make plays. And when a quarterback finally gets all three at once, that's when things start getting dangerous. If you love real talk and fearless NFL breakdowns, hit subscribe and join Coach Speaks. But here's the real question nobody seems ready to answer yet. Did the Browns just create the perfect environment for a breakout season? Or did they accidentally build something even bigger than that? Because if everything clicks, this might not just be an improvement. This might be the beginning of something the entire league has to deal with. Last season wasn't just disappointing for the Cleveland Browns. It exposed a problem that ran deeper than most people wanted to admit. On the surface, it was easy to point fingers. People blamed the quarterback. They questioned decision-making. They talked about missed throws, stalled drives, and an offense that just couldn't stay consistent. And when things kept going wrong, that narrative only got louder. But if you really watched what was happening snap after snap, a different story started to unfold. The offense never had a real chance. It started with the offensive line, or more accurately, the lack of one. Protection broke down fast. Pressure came early. And instead of running plays, the quarterback was constantly reacting, adjusting, escaping. Every drop back felt rushed. Every read felt compressed. There's only so much any quarterback can do in that situation. And that's where ShedeurSanders became the center of a narrative that wasn't entirely fair. Because when people saw inconsistency, they assumed it was a performance issue. But in reality, it was a survival issue. Routes didn't have time to develop. Receivers couldn't fully separate. The run game struggled to get going because defenders were already in the backfield before plays could even form. It created this domino effect where nothing worked the way it was supposed to. And once that kind of chaos sets in, it spreads. The quarterback starts anticipating pressure that isn't even there yet. Timing gets thrown off. Confidence starts to dip. And suddenly, the entire offense looks broken, not because of one player, but because the system around him isn't holding up. That's exactly what happened. And it didn't matter who stepped in. The results stayed the same. Which tells you everything you need to know. Because when multiple players struggle in the exact same way, the issue isn't the individual, it's the environment. But that wasn't the only problem. The lack of reliable weapons made things even worse. Receivers weren't consistently creating separation, and without time in the pocket, even the few opportunities that did exist were hard to capitalize on. The margin for error became almost zero. Everything had to be perfect, in a situation that made perfection impossible. That's why drives kept stalling. That's why big plays were rare. That's why the offense felt stuck, predictable, and easy to defend. Defenses didn't have to guess. They knew pressure would get there. They knew timing would be off. They knew the Browns couldn't stretch the field the way dangerous offenses do. And once defenses figure that out, it's over. So when people looked back at last season and asked, "What went wrong?" the answer wasn't complicated. The foundation was broken. And until that foundation got fixed, nothing else was ever going to work. But what happened next completely flipped that reality on its head. Everything changed the moment the Browns stopped trying to patch the problem and decided to rebuild it completely. Because what they did this offseason wasn't small. It wasn't a tweak. It wasn't a let's hope this works type of move. It was a full reset of the most important unit on the field, the offensive line. And once you understand that, everything else starts to make sense. The Browns went out and brought in serious protection, adding names like Titus Howard, Zion Johnson, and Elgton Jenkins. That's not just depth, that's intent. Because you don't invest like that unless you're trying to fix something at the root level. And that's exactly what they did. Instead of hoping young players would develop or that chemistry would magically improve, they brought in proven pieces, players who understand positioning, timing, and how to control the line of scrimmage. And that's the key word here, control. Last season, the Browns had none of it. Defenders were dictating everything. They were getting into the backfield early, collapsing pockets, forcing rushed decisions. The offense was constantly reacting instead of executing. But a strong offensive line flips that dynamic instantly. Now, it's the defense that has to react. Because when protection holds, everything slows down for the quarterback. Reads become clearer. Routes have time to develop. Running lanes actually open up instead of disappearing before they even exist. And suddenly, the same plays that failed last season start working. That's the kind of impact we're talking about. But here, what makes this even more interesting? This rebuild wasn't random. Every piece they added fills a specific gap. A tackle to handle edge pressure, guards to stabilize the interior, a center to anchor communication and keep everything organized. It's structured, it's calculated. It's built to function as one unit. And when an offensive line starts playing as a unit instead of 5 separate players, that's when it becomes dangerous. Because great defensive lines rely on breaking protection. But elite offensive lines, they eliminate that advantage completely. And if the Browns get even close to that level, it changes how every defense approaches them. Blitzing becomes risky. Sending extra pressure leaves gaps. Dropping back gives the quarterback too much time. There's no easy answer anymore. That's why this move matters so much. It's not just about reducing sacks or improving stats. It's about giving the offense an identity, a foundation, a level of stability that simply didn't exist before. And once that foundation is in place, everything built on top of it becomes more dangerous. The passing game opens up. The run game becomes consistent. The quarterback gains confidence. And when all of that starts clicking together, that's when an offense stops struggling and starts controlling games. But the biggest impact of this rebuild isn't just what it fixes. It's who it unlocks. Because now, for the first time, there's a real chance that the Browns' quarterback won't just survive the system. He'll finally be able to dominate inside it. For the longest time, the Browns couldn't catch a break from the media. Every move they made was questioned. Every decision was picked apart. And when it came to building around ShedeurSanders, the criticism was even louder. People doubted the vision. They said the team wasn't doing enough, that the pieces didn't fit, That even if Shedeur had talent, the Browns weren't the organization to unlock it. And honestly, after last season, it was hard to argue against that. But then something shifted. Quietly at first, and then all at once. The same voices that used to point out flaws started acknowledging something different. Instead of focusing on what the Browns lacked, they started talking about what they were building. And that's when you knew this wasn't just hype. It was real change. One of the biggest reasons for that shift, the arrival of Todd Monken. Because this isn't just any coach stepping into a new situation. This is someone who understands offensive systems at a high level, and more importantly, someone who reportedly believed in Shedeur long before this moment. There's been a lot of buzz around that connection. Reports suggest Monken had interest in working with Shedeur in previous stops, even trying to bring him into his system before. And while those moves didn't happen at the time, it shows one thing clearly. This wasn't a random pairing. This was something that had been building behind the scenes. And when a coach specifically wants a quarterback, not just accepts him, but actively believes in him, everything changes. Because now, the system isn't generic. It's tailored. The play calling, the structure, the packing, it all starts aligning with what the quarterback does best. And that's exactly what analysts are starting to recognize. Instead of questioning whether Shedeur fits into the Browns' offense, the conversation has flipped. Now it's about how well the offense fits him. That's a completely different level of confidence. And it didn't happen by accident. The offensive line rebuild, the focus on weapons, the shift in coaching philosophy, all of it points in one direction. Support the quarterback. Maximize his strengths. Remove the excuses. Even critics who were once skeptical are starting to admit that this is how you build around a young quarterback the right way. No shortcuts, no half measures. Just a clear plan. And that kind of validation matters more than people think. Because when the narrative changes externally, it usually reflects what's happening internally. It means the league is starting to notice. It means opposing teams are paying attention. And it means expectations are rising. But here, where things get really interesting. Because while critics are finally starting to give credit, the Browns aren't done building yet. In fact, the next moves they make could take this entire situation from promising to straight-up dangerous. Fixing the offensive line was step one. But what the Browns are doing now, that's where things start to feel dangerous. Because protection alone doesn't scare defenses. Weapons do. And suddenly, it looks like the Browns are loading up. With multiple early draft picks, including the 6th overall, they're sitting in a position most teams would kill for. Flexibility, leverage, and options. And from what's being said around the league, they're not planning to play it safe. They're planning to attack. There's been a lot of buzz around potential wide receiver targets like Carnell Tate and Jordan Tyson. Nothing is confirmed, of course, but rumors suggest the Browns are seriously looking to add explosive playmakers to this offense. And if that happens, if you love real talk and fearless NFL breakdowns, hit subscribe and join Coach Speaks. Everything changes again. Because now, you're not just talking about a quarterback with time. You're talking about a quarterback with options. And that's when things get scary. Defenses can handle one threat, sometimes even two. But when an offense starts stacking multiple weapons across the field, it forces defenders into impossible choices. Double one receiver, someone else gets open. Play coverage deep, the run game eats. Bring pressure, the quarterback has time to punish it. There's no perfect answer. And that's exactly the kind of pressure the Browns are trying to create. What makes this even more interesting is the type of players they're being linked to. Receivers coming out of systems like Ohio State have a reputation. They don't always enter the league as the biggest names, but they develop fast. They adjust. And before you realize it, they're taking over games. We've seen it happen again and again. So the idea here isn't just to grab a star. It's to build a core. Young, fast, explosive players who can grow alongside ShedeurSanders and peak at the same time. That's long-term thinking. That's how you build something sustainable. And the Browns have the assets to make it happen. With picks not just in the top 10, but also later in the first and early in the second round, they have the ability to get aggressive, trade up, target specific players, or stack depth across multiple positions. Reports suggest they could even package picks to move higher if a receiver they love starts slipping. That tells you everything. This isn't a team hopping talent falls to them. This is a team going out to get it. And the impact of that kind of mindset goes beyond just adding players. It changes the identity of the offense. Because now, instead of hopping for plays to develop, you're creating mismatches on purpose. You're forcing defenses to guess, and then punishing them when they guess wrong. And for a quarterback like Shedeur, that's the perfect environment. Multiple reads, reliable targets, space to operate. That's how elite offenses are built. Not around one star, but around layers of pressure that hit defenses from every angle. And if the Browns pull this off the way it's starting to look, this won't just be an improved offense. It'll be one that defenses genuinely fear lining up against. But even with all these weapons being added, the biggest shift hasn't even been fully realized yet. For a while, there was always one question hanging over everything in Cleveland. Was this ever truly going to be ShedeurSanders' team? Because no matter how much potential he showed, there was always uncertainty. Rumors about veteran quarterbacks, talk about experienced names coming in, the idea that the Browns might not fully commit. And in the NFL, that kind of doubt matters. Because when a young quarterback feels like someone is constantly right behind him, waiting for one mistake, it changes how he plays. He hesitates. He overthinks. He plays not to mess up instead of playing to win. That's how development gets stalled. That's how talent gets limited. But now, that pressure is starting to disappear. There's been a noticeable shift in how the Browns are approaching this situation. Instead of bringing in big-name veterans to compete or potentially take over, they've leaned in the opposite direction. The talk now is about giving Shedeur the space to grow, the reps to develop, and the confidence to lead. And that changes everything. Because when a quarterback knows the job is his, not temporarily, not conditionally, but fully his, the mindset flips instantly. He stops looking over his shoulder. He starts looking downfield. And that's when the real version of a player begins to show. For Shedeur, this could be the moment where everything slows down, where the game stops feeling rushed and starts feeling controlled, where decisions become sharper, throws become more confident, and leadership starts to take shape. And that confidence doesn't just stay with him. It spreads. The offensive line plays harder because they're protecting their guy. Receivers run routes with more urgency because they trust the ball is coming. Coaches open up the playbook because they believe in what the quarterback can handle. That's how an offense evolves. Not just through talent, but through belief. And right now, it feels like the Browns are finally committing to that belief. There's no more mixed signals. No more, we'll see how it goes. This is about building around one direction. And that direction is clear. But here's the part that makes this even more dangerous. Shedeur isn't just getting an opportunity. He's getting it at the perfect time. A rebuilt offensive line in front of him, new weapons being added around him, a system that's starting to shape itself to his strengths. This isn't a trial run. This is a setup. And setups like this don't come often. Because when everything aligns, protection, coaching, talent, and opportunity, that's when quarterbacks take massive leaps. The kind that change careers. The kind that change franchises. So now the question is whether Shedeur will get his chance. That part is already happening. The real question is, what does he do with it? Because if he takes full advantage of this moment, if he plays with the freedom and confidence this situation allows, Then what we're about to see might be something Cleveland hasn't had in a very long time. A true leader at quarterback, with nothing holding him back. There was always something to point to before. A reason, an excuse, a built-in explanation for why things weren't working. The line couldn't protect, the receivers weren't separating, the system didn't fit, the pressure was constant, the situation was messy. And because of that, every performance from ShedeurSanders came with an asterisk. If he had more time, if the offense was better, if the pieces around him actually worked. Those ifs followed him everywhere. But now, they're gone. The Browns didn't just improve the situation, they erased the excuses entirely. The offensive line has been rebuilt with real investment. Not temporary fixes, but players brought in specifically to stabilize protection and control the pace of the game. That alone removes the biggest issue from last season. Then you look at the weapons. Young, explosive, and still growing, but finally capable of creating separation, stretching the field, and turning short plays into big gains. It's not perfect, but it's real. It's functional. And most importantly, it gives the quarterback options. And then there's the coaching. A system that's starting to align with Shedeur's strengths instead of forcing him into something uncomfortable. A structure that allows him to read, react, and actually play his game instead of constantly adjusting to survive. Put all of that together, and you get something Cleveland hasn't had in a long time. Clarity. Because now, when Shedeur steps on the field, there's no confusion about what this is. This is his offense. This is his opportunity. And this is his moment. There's no veteran breathing down his neck. No constant speculation about someone taking his spot after one bad game. No built-in safety net for the team to fall back on. That pressure, it's different now. Before it was external, uncertainty, doubt, instability. Now it's internal. Expectation. And that's a completely different kind of challenge. Because when everything is finally in place, when the line holds, the receivers get open, and the system works, the focus shifts directly to the quarterback. Execution becomes everything. Decision-making becomes everything. Results become everything. And for the first time, Shedeur is stepping into a situation where he will be judged purely on what he does with the opportunity in front of him. No more context, no more excuses. Just performance. But here's the thing. That's not a bad position to be in. In fact, for a player with his skill set, it might be the best possible scenario. Because this is where confidence turns into leadership. This is where talent turns into production. This is where potential either rises or gets exposed. And based on everything the Browns have done, it's clear they believe they know which direction this is going. They didn't build all of this just to see what happens. They built it expecting results. So now, the conversation changes completely. It's no longer about whether ShedeurSanders is ready. It's about whether the league is ready for what happens if he is. Because if he steps into this role and delivers the way this setup suggests he can, then this won't just be a breakout story. If you love real talk and fearless NFL breakdowns, hit subscribe and join Coach Speaks. It'll be a warning to every defense that has to face him next. This is where everything comes together. Because when you step back and look at the full picture, it doesn't feel like a normal rebuild anymore. It feels like something much bigger is starting to take shape in Cleveland. The Browns didn't just fix weaknesses. They replaced them with strengths. The offensive line, rebuilt with intention. The weapons, getting faster, younger, and more explosive. The coaching, aligned with the quarterback instead of working against him. And right in the center of all of it is ShedeurSanders, stepping into a situation that looks completely different from anything he's had before. That's what makes this so dangerous. Because we've seen this pattern before in the NFL. A young quarterback struggles early, not because of talent, but because of the environment. Then suddenly everything clicks. Protection improves, the system fits, confidence rises. And when that happens, the leap isn't small. It's explosive. That's the kind of moment the Browns might be walking into right now. Because for the first time, Shedeur isn't being asked to survive chaos. He's being given control. Time in the pocket, options downfield, a system built to highlight what he does best. And when a quarterback gets all of that at once, the game starts to look easy. Defenses get stretched, coverages break down, plays that used to fail start turning into big gains. It builds momentum. And momentum in the NFL is everything. But here, where it gets even more interesting, there's still a level of uncertainty around all of this. Because as much as the setup looks perfect on paper, nothing is guaranteed. There's been a lot of buzz online, fans, analysts, insiders, all speculating about what this offense could become. Some believe it could turn into one of the most explosive units in the league. Others are more cautious, pointing out that potential doesn't always translate immediately. And that's fair. Because until it happens on the field, it's still just projection. But even with that uncertainty, one thing is clear. The ceiling has changed. This is no longer a team people overlook. This is a team people are starting to watch closely. And if everything comes together the way it's starting to look, they won't just be competitive. They'll be dangerous. The kind of team that forces defenses to adjust. The kind of offense that creates problems every single week. The kind of situation where one player, one quarterback, can completely shift the direction of a franchise. That's what's at stake here. And that's why so many people are paying attention now. Because if ShedeurSanders takes full advantage of this moment, if he steps into this system and delivers the way it's been set up for him to, then this won't just be a breakout season. It could be the beginning of something much bigger. Something the rest of the league isn't ready for. So now the question isn't whether the Browns improved. That part is already obvious. The real question is, what happens when it all finally clicks? Because if it does, everyone's going to wish they saw it coming.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.